what you're going to get is then the benefits of the nasal breathing afterwards. And
what are the benefits? Let's jump into that. So what are the benefits from nasal breathing for performance, and then maybe in general as well, just in case people aren't aware?
One thing in terms of mechanically helping us to, we're not that we necessarily 100% will, but we're more likely to breathe with the diaphragm when we're nasal breathing. There's more of a connection with the diaphragm rather than that shallow upper chest breathing, which is more related to that stressful state. So if I'm running during my marathon, it's fairly stressful on the body because we're running for so long. Do I want my breathing to like emphasize that stress state, or can I get my breathing to be calmer and a bit more relaxed? So nasal breathing will help with that from the perspective of like what we're getting the movement of the diaphragm and all the vagus nerve stimulation we'll get from that. But a lot of it in terms of from sport and exercise being that efficiency of oxygen delivery in terms of like the nose providing resistance to our breathing, which will help slow it down. And when we're able to slow down our breathing, this is where it's one of those things at first. You try and slow down your breathing at first with nasal breathing, it feels horrendous. So not only is your nose blocked, you're like feeling like you're out of breath and what's that feeling of out of breath like? What's it coming from? It's coming back to that CO2 tolerance. Those CO2 levels rising, your body can't currently deal with it. But when you get better at dealing with it, not only does oxygen get released from red blood cells more easily and efficiently, you're getting, your body will be better at buffering all the H plus ions, lactic acid that's coming as a result of that CO2 production, and the whole system then starts to become more efficient.
Right.
And when I was really struggling during the marathon, like towards the end, I put into practice the idea of like larger breaths, but taking less of them per minute, slowing the breathing rate down, but taking proportionally larger. So still getting the same volume of air in, but not losing as much air in dead space. And I would go from I would do say like 10 of those in a row. People probably thought I was crazy. I'm like running up this hill. And at this point, people are just walking up the hill. They just give up. And I'm like, I had two rules. One was don't walk. And the second one was enjoy it. That's what I wanted out of the marathon. There was no time. It was like, don't walk and enjoy it. So I didn't walk. And so I'm like jogging around. I'm like going, even with my hands, I was doing this. Like, to try and help that move.
Some Tai Chi move. I like it.
yeah. But how my legs then felt after doing like sort of like 5, 6 or 10 breaths like that. Like I could tangibly feel that like oxygen or feeling of energy or whatever, like getting into my legs. And, it 100% works. Yeah. I did a little video as I was running along doing it, like literally saying this, going this is what I'm doing. This is how I feel. This stuff works. And it's not just a research paper. It's there. It's there and it works. But you've got to do the work to get the benefits.
Indeed.
If you might already be a nasal breather just because you've got good habits, and then you go out and you're going to feel good and you'll be like, yeah, this is great. Yeah, Jacko, woo, yeah, do the nasal breathing. But if you're not a nasal breather when you're asleep or when you're just doing the dishes or when you're on your computer and you've got a dysfunctional breathing, but you're not aware of it, you'll hear nasal breathe, that's going to be better for you. And like, all this stuff. And then you go out and try it and it feels horrendous.
Yeah, indeed.
Because you're just not adapted to it.
Sure. Yeah. Indeed.
So we just have to do a little bit of work but the benefits are there for you. Right. And the benefits, if you use them in your exercise, it means that people that exercise, you can do it when you're exercising. Therefore, it's not an extra job for you to do during the day.
Right. Right.
I think the first podcast you did with Patrick, he said something that everything he says resonates with me, but he said one thing that resonates with me, of that he was like, you asked him, what's his breathing, he's like the guy, like what's your breathing
daily routine? Yeah.
He's like, well, I'm a pretty busy guy. Like, he's writing books for fun and he's got, and he was like, for me, it has to just be part of my everyday living and everyday life and activities. And that is the key. When you give people more stuff to do, what do clients say? If they feel like you've got to do half an hour of breathing here, then you've got to do it here, then you've got to do it here. They're like, I just can't fit it in. I've got too much stuff going on.
Yeah.
I'm passionate about and feel a bit of a mission of like, I want to try and make breath work normal. Like you were saying, like it doesn't, I'm down with like, let's put a bandana on and like play a guitar and like go, I'm down with that. That's what I want to do. But that's going to be a barrier for a lot of people. And actually, you said it right at the beginning. Breathing is for everyone. We're all doing it.
Yeah.
So you're going to get most benefit out of changing your breathing for 23 hours of the day rather than just 1 hour where you sit on your yoga mat and practice breathing.
Yes.
If you breathe poorly for the other time, it's going to have little to no effect.
Right.
So if you're already exercising, start thinking about how you breathe before you exercise, how you breathe during exercise, how you're going to breathe during your recovery, and then how you sort of breathing when you're warming down afterwards. And you can just like package it up in stuff you're already doing. And that's the key to, I think, for a lot of people to be able to make it consistent. How can I package it into what I already do?
Yeah, it's got to be sustainable. And one of the things that I always tell kind of the people that I work with any clientele, I say, if you can just make one change, like I'm not even telling you to set aside, 5 minutes, let alone an hour. I just want you to, I don't even want you to set aside time. I just want you to tune in and be a little bit more focused of your breath in general. That's number one. And then number two, just see what you can do to transition yourself from mouth breathing to nasal breathing, because a lot of people probably don't even understand the fact that they're mouth breathers until they notice that they're mouth breathers. They transition to nasal breathing, which, like we said, can be difficult at first because you're talking about with your mouth, you can breathe in a lot of air really quickly, right? Even though you're just breathing it thoracically, like in the chest, you can get a lot in really quickly. Whereas when you breathe through your nose, you are forced to slow down. There's a lot more resistance there, but you have so many other things that are happening physiologically, right? Like the increase in NO or nitric oxide. You have the ability to slow down and engage in a more deeper breath. And we'll talk about LSD breathing here in just a second. And no, I'm not talking about drug-related breathing. I'll explain it here in just a second. I've had people like, LSD breathing? Is that you pop some LSD and then you breathe? Yeah, exactly. It's just finding what is the most sustainable thing. And I think, again, it's just number one is just being self-aware and being in tune with your breathing. And then if you want to take it to the next step, then we start to introduce it into exercise. Maybe we do set a little bit of devoted time to breathing. Like, that's fine. But am I saying like everybody needs to drop what they're doing, be a yogi, and like go sit out a mat for, an hour, 2 hours and just breathe? Like, if you have the ability to sustain that as a part of your lifestyle and it benefits you, I'm not holding you back from it. You go for it. But for the bulk majority of us, it's just a matter of building it into the small sections and throughout our day. That's going to really help. And I think that there is such a compounding effect with breath work, right? Like the more we do it and the more we're going to condition the nervous system and our physiology to respond that way in times where we're not necessarily thinking about it, like when we're stressed, because we know when we're stressed, our body naturally kind of kicks into high fight or flight sympathetic gear. And what that means is we start breathing thoracically, like from our chest. We start mouth breathing, like we're not focusing kind of in the way that we should. We're just trying to get out of the threat that's, in front of us. Whereas if we continue to train the body, no, I'm not going to respond to a threat by doing kind of all these other things that can be detrimental because I kind of sustain them for a long period of time. I'm now going to focus on what can help me. Nasal breathing, low, slow, deep breathing. All of these things can be conditioned. And, I always tell people too, from birth, like we breathe in a very proper way. However, at some point in our life, whether due to, compounding stress or whatever it may be, we fade away from that. And really, we're just kind of getting back to the basics. We're getting back to the basics of how we are built and designed to breathe. And, again, we don't have to just throw everything, under the kitchen sink at it to begin with, because again, that's not sustainable. It's like me taking somebody who does a standard American diet and says, I'm going to make you, a carnivore or a vegan, like, within the snap of a finger. Doesn't happen. People don't make change like that. They make change in small little chunks. And then they also have to say, number one, I know that this can benefit me, and then they experience it and say that, yes, this is benefiting me, because otherwise, like, what reason do they have to continue to kind of engage in this behavior that isn't kind of a part of their normal daily routine? So that's kind of how I frame it to them, and it sounds like, you do the same.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to the Hanu Health Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. This podcast would not happen without listeners and supporters like you. And the best way to support us and the show is to head on over to iTunes and provide us with a 5-star review. This helps us reach others and spread the good word of breathing and stress resiliency. If we read your 5-star review on air, please reach out to podcast@hanuhealth.com with your name and mailing address, and we will send you some sweet Hanu gear. Until next time, breathe better and stress less.